Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RN Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench. Hi guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of Fighting on Film. Today we're going to be discussing the classic Battleground, 1949 film directed by William Wellman, and it was an Oscar winner.
Yeah, very famous film of its day. It's everything that the Battle of the Bulge isn't, really. It's actually a decent film. More than a decent film.
Yeah, it's night and day, really, isn't it? It's a much better film. Just
from the outset, it's very clear what the film is.
Well, it actually tells the battle story. It tells the story of the battle. It isn't just a random story set within the period of the Battle of the Bulge, the location, the general area. It's an actual narrative telling of the experience of one small group of men fighting in Bastogne. In the Battle of the Bulge, the movie, we only see like Bastogne for 30 seconds, and it's to shoehorn in that iconic nuts line from General McAuliffe.
That's
when
it.
he replies to the German call for a surrender. But at least in Battleground, we actually get to see Bastogne itself.
The whole film centered around Bastogne. Not all of the men, just one platoon, isn't it?
101st Airborne, and I think it's they make a point of saying it's the glider battalion of the 101st.
That's it. Yeah,
and it's like C Company or number 3 Company or number 3 platoon.
When they mount up to go into combat, the sergeant goes, trucks instead of gliders this time.
That's a good line.
So that it's full of good lines, this movie.
It is actually, yeah. There's quite a few good ones.
It was made by MGM, 1949. The memory of the war is still very, very fresh in people's minds. And this film wasn't slated to do badly, but it definitely wasn't slated to do as well as this did.
Right.
Getting nominated for 5 Oscars, winning 2 Oscars, cinematography and writing. It re-evaluated to the studios that a war movie could be an award winner. So I think after this, you see a sea change, and this is a sort of a pioneer.
Yeah, I suppose it's easy to forget that there've been a lot of war movies made during the war as morale efforts or as propaganda. And then after the war, I suppose the studios thought, well, now everyone wants to see westerns and comedies and a bit of lightheartedness. They perhaps aren't cinema-going audiences aren't going to be too interested in a gritty war movie. And apparently, Battleground proved that wasn't the case. The audiences were interested in it. And I think I read somewhere that Battleground was like the most successful film for the studio in like 5 years.
I think it made upwards of 4 million. No small change back then. It's like the 1917 of its day. The amount of Oscars that it's nominated for today, this would be a blockbuster pick of the day. The acting as well is really good.
It is. It's a good cast. It's not a cast full of like well-known people. I did also read that people like Robert Mitchum and a couple of other fairly well-known actors were initially attached, but it swapped studio when one studio wasn't interested in producing it.
It was meant to be done on RKO Pictures, but it swapped to MGM, and I think at the time, certain actors only worked for certain studios.
Yeah.
You can't get the big name like Robert Mitchum. I think he might have been a bit needless in this film, really, because Van Johnson, your main man, he was huge at the time. I think he was 3rd at the box office.
Big draw, yeah.
Big draw. But the movie uses him quite well, though. I don't think they definitely don't pin the whole film on him.
No, it's quite an ensemble piece, really, isn't it, when you think about it, considering that the cast isn't, big names, but they're good supporting actors.
Definitely.
And you got James Whitmore in there, who's great as a sort of like grizzled
Sergeant Kinney.
Sergeant, yeah.
He's very archetypal sergeant, isn't he? He's chewing tobacco. Things that we'll talk about more about him later. You've got cliches of soldiers in this movie. You've got like an old guy who's waiting to be shipped back to
retired,
shipped back to the States.
Get his discharge.
That's it. You've got a guy who lives in Los Angeles, Rodriguez.
Played by Ricardo Montalban, who was famously Khan in Star Trek Wrath of Khan.
Oh, well, there you go.
Which is the best Star Trek movie.
Khan on the Bulge. Khan Dens. Sorry.
Khan Dens, oh my God. And then there's a couple of other faces that you recognise but can't put a name to instantly. Directed by William Wellman, as I mentioned, who was a World War One fighter pilot for the American Expeditionary Force,
Wow.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Probably well known for his 1927 film Wings.
Yep. He picked up the first ever Best Film Oscar for that.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Which, and the pedigree the movie has, the people who are involved in it. It's no wonder it did as well as it did when you think about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, Wellman on his own had directed like a series of really like well-received films, like Public Enemy with James Cagney and A Star Is Born, which won an Oscar. The direction and the cinematography of Battleground, despite being filmed in a studio, I suppose when you think about it, like that fog, the snow, the enclosed space of the Ardennes with the trees, it's all very claustrophobic anyway.
Yeah, it lends itself to a studio piece. Unlike the Battle of the Bulge, which chose to shoot on location, rightly or wrongly.
In Spain.
Famously in Spain. You don't need to know that. You know that it's the Ardennes because it's snowy. There are trees everywhere. It's foggy. It's clearly the Ardennes.
It feels cold.
It feels cold, yeah, it does.
Unlike the Battle of the Bulge, it feels cold. You can feel when like James Whitmore's Sergeant Kenny is like struggling with his like trench bitten feet, and he's stumbling around, and we get those really nice close-up shots of his feet like shuffling through snow.
That's it, yeah.
And you just feel like the unpleasantness of being stuck in the middle of the Ardennes in the dead of winter and having to survive, basically.
And they also do a better job in this movie of conveying their cold than the Bulge.
Yes.
In the Battle of the Bulge film, they all just had on M43 jackets, and that was it. But in this film, they've got their long johns, they've got their jumper, they've got their M43 on, then they've got their greatcoat on, and if they're lucky, they might even have a blanket over that.
And they discuss like goulashes as well, like rubber boots and stuff.
Gotta get your goulashes, guys. We're going up to the front. They all do talk like that. I'm not just taking the piss.
For once, Robbie's American accent is right on the money.
Even Van Johnson, he's like, oh boy, like, come on, guys.
Yeah, they're kind of, you could sort of describe them as being a little bit caricaturish, but I think it's more of a pastiche. So it was written by Robert Pirosh, who was a combat veteran that was, he fought during the Battle of the Bulge. He wasn't with the 101st.
No.
But he was a combat veteran.
Yeah.
And he was involved in the units that pushed through to relieve Bastogne.
Yeah, and that's echoed at the end of the film as well, isn't it? When they push through.
It is. So I think a lot of the writing is based on his own personal experiences, and he would have known how people spoke to each other.
Yeah. When they're being soldiers, for want of a better term, they're interacting with officers, taking orders. They're very soldierly. But when they're with their mates, the banter, the camaraderie, they're taking the mickey out of army sayings and things. They keep going, I found a life in the army.
Yeah. That's one of the lines they'd like to repeat for hours. Isn't it? It's really,
and it's
a funny line.
They're making a mockery of why they signed up. At the start, they go, oh, remember the lieutenant that said any man that leaves his gas mask in Normandy is going to be up for a court-martial? And they all laugh because they've not had a gas attack. They're all saying, use your gas mask for extra.
Yeah, like they're carrying cognac in the respirator cases, aren't they?
Came in lucky for that cognac we liberated. And then when they get in the truck to disembark for Bastogne, the same lieutenant comes up to the new guys and is like, make sure you got your gas masks.
Could save your life.
Save your life one day, kid. And they all look at each other like, oh, God, here we go again.
Yeah, and there's that great scene of them sort of like marching into the Ardennes, and they're starting to like feel the weight of their packs, and you just start seeing like gas masks landing on the the side of the road in the ditch.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. But those gas mask bags that the Americans have, you could fit a lot of stuff in them. A lot of gas masks got slung, didn't they? So it's a nice little inclusion. I mean, you can tell someone wrote this with care, wrote this with respect foremostly, I think. And a la Theirs Is the Glory, 20 veterans, 101st Airborne veterans, were brought in to whip the actors into shape at a boot camp.
Veterans were paired up with a member of the cast, and they just like ran them through how they would have. I mean, some of the cast were actually servicemen. I'd say Whitmore was a Marine.
To go into the plot a little bit more, it simply is the story of these guys going into Bastogne, their experiences of that action. I think it's done very, very well. It tells the story of the Battle of the Bulge from their perspective, which makes it a tighter film and it makes you care more because of Battle of the Bulge. I mean, we're going to do a lot of comparison, I think,
I
but
think you have to, really, don't you? You can't discuss this without referencing how bad
yeah,
Battle of the Bulge actually is.
there's too many characters in that for me to
Yeah.
care. And famously, I really didn't care about anyone in that film, but I really end up rooting for these guys.
Yeah, you become invested.
Really do, because they've all got their own little story. They've all got their own reasoning for why they're fighting. So the older GI, he's what was it, Matt? What was it called?
He's waiting on his dependency discharge for his sick wife, so he's going
That's
to go
it.
home and look after his wife.
Yeah, and he's really excited.
Yeah,
Obviously,
he cannot wait to get out.
yeah. I think he's called Pop, isn't he?
Yeah, they call him like Pap or Pop throughout. Like it's just like reference to how like he's older than the rest of them. The character development within the film is so much better than the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the characters in the Battle of the Bulge sort of like spiral around, almost sort of like devolve rather than evolve. But whereas with Battleground, you know, we see Van Johnson's character step up into the NCO role that he doesn't really want.
He's PFC, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a bit of a Jack the Lad, not too interested in being an NCO, and you know gets thrust into the role when the squad leader gets wounded.
When he gets promoted, he says, "Where's your helmet, kid?" And he goes, "Oh, I lost it, sir." And he goes, "Try this on for size, Sarge." And it's very, it's cheesy, but it's not at the same time. Like I can forgive this movie for any of its cheesiness, any of its humor that doesn't quite land, possibly because it's not the Battle of the Bulge film. Like it just gets a free pass.
Well, you know, Paul made an interesting point about sort of like the caricature nature of some of the characters in Battleground when we were discussing the Battle of the Bulge film on the Homebrew podcast a few weeks ago. He was saying that this film is sort of like the beginning of some of those like stereotypes that evolve in war movies. You know, like the grizzled veteran that's waiting to retire. You know, the young idealistic replacement. You know, the grizzled sergeant. You know, those sort of like archetypal stereotypes that have been perpetuated throughout war movies, or probably since like, you know, during the actual war itself, when the genre was sort of like emerging and evolving on the cuff.
I think also for me, it struck me as one of the few movies that I've seen about GIs that is quite conscious of portraying them as civilian soldiers as well. You know, they all have lives back home. They do mention their wives. They mention their jobs previous, all things like that. And it reminded me that they're human beings. It is very respectful. And it shows their foibles as well. You know, they keep saying how you can get yourself invalided out. If you've got less than 6 teeth or something, you can leave.
Yeah, there's that guy that has like false teeth and he can't find his false teeth in the snow.
Yeah. And he keeps clicking them. That's his whole thing. They've all got their little quirks.
They do, yeah. And there's that, you know, there's the sort of like country bumpkin stereotype where he's like,
yippee,
yeah, he keeps singing that, and you know, and he's like, that's for dang sure, you know, and
that's for sure, that's for dang sure.
So you get all these kind of little quirky parts of these characters.
Catchphrases, aren't they? Oh, yeah.
So that immediately gives the writing of the film is instantly better than anything in the Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah, its conversational language is way better, and you learn a lot more about the war at that point.
Yeah, it's more nuanced.
A lot more nuanced. You know, you haven't got that. To quote the scene in Battle of the Bulge, a man doesn't pick up an MP44 and go, "Oh, what the hell's that?" Throws it away and it moves on.
Oh, I know, that terrible intelligence officer.
Yeah. You know, in this movie, they shout to a Frenchman, "Where are we?" And he goes, "Oh, you don't want to know."
Yeah.
You know, he's like, "Oh God," you know, even he doesn't know where they are. You only know as much as they know, and I feel that as a narrative structure is always better than the Battle of the Bulge movie, assuming that everyone watching knows about this action.
I would much rather learn what's going on along with the characters rather than finding out in 30 minutes of exposition in a bunker.
We even find out the town name that they're in, because they don't ever say they're going to Bastogne.
No.
Secret orders, rip off your patches.
Yeah, that's a nice touch in and of itself. You know,
it is.
Rip your patches off, then put your patches back on. They're digging the foxholes in one position, then having to move to another as soon as they're almost, you know, finished with that foxhole. They have to go and dig in elsewhere. So it's these little plot points that they hammer home some of
the realism.
Yeah, some of the realism, some of the aspects that you don't think about.
It wins cinematography Oscar, and quite rightly so. Some of the shots in this film are really, really well done.
Yeah.
Just from a film making point of view, this movie splices in real footage from the battle itself.
It does, yeah.
But it does it so well. I would say it's the best example of splicing in stock footage that I've seen. There's a shot, maybe people who are listening will know what I mean, and maybe they won't, but there's a shot of men moving up to the line, and it's a mid shot,
Yeah.
and they're walking up a road. Then it cuts to the film, to Battleground, and it's implied it's the same men walking into shot. But because it goes from a mid to a close, it's so seamless that you don't even notice. And I only noticed it on the third watch of the movie that was stock footage because it was so well done.
So apparently some of it was filmed in Northern California in the hills. I think what they've done very cleverly there is they've melded in those long shots of stock footage with some closer shots of them, actually outdoors, where you can see a lot more of the, the terrain. And then it sort of melds into those studio shots where it's claustrophobic, it's close.
Yeah.
There's no need for backdrops because the trees are there. The trees are the backdrops.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Then when they're driving up, there's a shot of a military policeman giving directions. That's from 44. But it's only a 5-second clip, but that's all you need. It's all you need to know that they're moving up to the line. But it works so well.
It does.
Whoever was staging those shots, whoever cinematographer, did a fucking good job.
Paul Vogel was the cinematographer. Just to jump ahead, I think I'll discuss what my favorite scene is, because that's one of the scenes that the cinematography is so clever.
Sure.
So there's a scene near the end of the film where the platoon's dug in, and the sergeant, Sergeant Kenny, James Whitmore, and the platoon leader, the lieutenant, they realise that the Germans are advancing on a couple of sides, and there's nowhere for them really to go. They're dug in. Each shot is a sort of medium close shot of the men fixing their bayonets. They're grim-faced. They know what's coming. They're laying out grenades next to, whatever ammunition they have left. Whitmore's up on this sort of snowy mound looking out. And, he's watching the enemy come on, and he tells them to hold their fire, let them come close because they're going to come close. And at that moment, the clouds part, and we get this beautiful shadow that's cast over Whitmore. It's the outline of tree branches, etc. And it's at that point you realize the cloud cover that's enabled the German offensive to, be carried out without Allied air superiority, interdicting it, has gone. That cloud is breaking up. And that's kind of the point of the moment of salvation. And, Whitmore's ecstatic. And the squad individually realizes, and they go from this grim, determination to just being ecstatic that
pure joy, isn't it?
Yeah, they're going to get air support, they're going to get resupply. Those scenes follow on, and there's some nice stock footage.
It's a great montage as well.
Speaking of montages, the film rounds off combining stock footage and close-ups of the characters.
Yes.
Some of them firing on the move, like I think the sergeant's giving orders, but over the top of it, it's sort of spliced in with footage of artillery firing, mortars firing, an M1919 rattling off a belt. There's all these little
iconography, isn't it?
It is, and it's indicating that there's a push, there's a pushback. The counter-attacking, the situation is becoming more stable.
Because that's another thing as well, that sequence is probably the most action that we really have in one big go. The action scenes in the film are very sporadic.
Yes.
And that echoes fighting that was happening around that area. It was very sporadic fighting because of the weather. But then once the fog cleared and it erupts into this cacophony of sound and picture, it's a really nice way of showing the fight back without having to extend the movie by another hour.
Yeah, it's very clever cinema making.
The sound design in the movie is just fantastic. It's the only film where there's no Garand Ping.
No.
And I actually really, really like that.
Because there's plenty of close-ups of them, rapid firing into the trees and ambushing some German troops, and because you wouldn't hear individual sounds like that in a firefight. That myth of the Garand Ping is heavily overdone. It's it's not the case that Germans waited to hear the ping to attack. It's not true, because you wouldn't hear that over a squad of M1 Garands firing. You're not going to hear individual the clatter of a on block clip coming out of a M1 Garand receiver. It's just not going to happen.
I would wager as well, this is before Garand Ping was even a trope. So Matt, do you think it's time for the alley tally?
Let's do it.
you got a alley pick this week?
I think my pick for the alley tally this week would be the M45 Quad 50s opening up
Ooh,
when the Germans bomb Bastogne.
yeah.
How often do you see an M45 Quad 50 going at it? You just don't see it in films. Like
No.
that blew me away. I was like, I was not expecting that to pop up. If you're not familiar with what an M45 Quad 50 is, it's basically 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted on a electronic powered mount that allows the 4 guns to sort of like track fast moving aircraft. And these things put out about 2,000, 2,300 rounds per minute.
Blimey.
Yeah, they put out significant firepower, and you get a couple of nice little shots of that in Battleground.
Yeah.
And there's a nice little bit where they go, well, that's it, and they're like, because they run out of ammo.
Yeah, because it goes through it so quick.
Yeah, but that's my pick for this week.
That's a great little pick. I love it. My alley pick this week is basically everything that Sergeant Kinney either does or is wearing or has about his person. He's walking alley. From the minute you sort of first see him, he comes into the tent. He's got a safety pin doing up his greatcoat. I think he's got blankets or something wrapped around his feet. And he's chewing tobacco, and he like spits tobacco every time he talks.
Yeah, he's chewing that tobacco constantly, isn't he?
And then I thought, oh, this man can't get any more alley. Like, he just can't get any more alley. The way he talks, the way he is with his men and all that kind of thing. And then later on in the movie, he brushes some snow off of his Thompson,
mm-hmm.
and he had jungle mags. Considering, well, you're not in the jungle for one. So I was like, okay, buddy. And I was thinking, that's got to be the worst thing to have in a muddy, snowy environment.
Well, he wanted those rounds on hand.
He did.
So for the listeners' benefit, if you don't know what jungle mag is, it's 2 magazines taped together with one the reverse of the other. So once you empty one magazine, you can drop that mag, swap the mag around, insert the underneath one. It's highly alley. It's an alley drill. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a pro move.
But even the way he fires his Thompson as well, like he does this bit where he's like, I think he's shooting at some men that are running through a clearing, but he's sort of behind a little hillock, but he sort of leans up and does like a sort of gangster style, like gives him a burst. It clearly someone who has used a Thompson before, because they know exactly what they're doing. Like he clearly was ex-Marine.
For the discerning viewer, you'll notice that that's an M1928A1 Thompson.
Yep.
And you can tell that by the fact that it has the cocking handle on the top of the receiver, not the bottom of the receiver. And it also has a cuts compensator as well, which the M1 and M1A didn't really have because, cost cutting.
Yeah.
I think a cuts compensator was like $5.
Oh, can't spend that on our Valiant GIs. Top alley this week.
Honourable mention to the M1919A6. That was pretty nice to be included. That again, like the M45 quad mount, you don't really see.
No, you don't.
1919A6 is very often in films.
No.
It's always a BAR. We do see a BAR very briefly, but we don't really see one firing.
No, you don't. It's nice that sort of all the winter gear you see as well. That's really well done. I just like I like all the individual touches. Like some men have scarves, some don't. Some men have got genuine GI issue winter gloves. Some just have woolen gloves, probably sent from home.
Another atmospheric touch that I liked that made you feel the cold was when the guy can't open up his bandolier. Pull out an on-block clip.
That's it, yeah.
Because it's frozen.
Yeah, I like that.
And someone has to come and bring him him some ammo. You just can't get it open. And there's that other guy that can't get the action of his M1 Garand open either because it's frozen.
Matt's done his favourite scene.
So what's yours, Robbie?
Well, my favourite scene is, I say his favourite scene, it's more like a favourite section because it keeps coming back. Van Johnson, who's called Holly. So Holly and the replacements put on watch. What's the password? Oh, it's jitterbug. So they know the password. So these guys come out of the mist and the fog, and the replacement goes, "Oh, the jitterbug." So they meet the guys and they're asking like where they are, and obviously the replacement's just willing to tell the lieutenant like where they are. So he goes, "Oh, is there a bridge up there?" He goes, "Oh yeah, just like down the road there's a bridge." And Van Johnson is just looking sort of a bit apprehensively like, okay. But he doesn't really say anything because obviously, why would he? And then later on they go, "Oh, the bridge was blown up. They must have been German commandos."
Yeah, what I like about that scene is Van Johnson's character's like, What an idiot. Why is he wearing his tabs? You know, like his rank insignia on patrol.
On patrol, yeah. Must be new.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he says he must be new.
Must be new.
Johnson's character sort of like is quite savvy, and they encounter Germans.
Yeah.
The fifth columnist infiltrators again later, don't they, in the woods?
That's it.
When they're on a 3-man patrol, and you know he clocks immediately that they aren't American.
Yeah. Well, that leads into my favourite scene. Van Johnson, Rodriguez character, and I think it's the new guy. They're on this patrol. So they're in this little clearing. This Jeep comes out of nowhere and they stop it. And there's a major in the Jeep. Van Johnson goes, "What's the password?" "Texas." The sergeant in the Jeep with the major goes, "Liga, Texas Liga." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm not asking you. Like, what's a Texas Liga?" to the major. And he goes, "Oh, it's some sort of baseball term." They just go into all this this Americana dialogue, saying like, "Oh, what actors with what actress? What's a Texas Liga? How did the Dodgers do this year?" It's all very
there's baseball, there's sports stuff, there's like popular culture questions, back and forths.
Yeah. When they don't think the GI Major is an actual American, Van Johnson starts going, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch, Americana, Americana." And he probably like hands it up. It's a really funny scene, but the reason I like it so much is because it's everything that the Battle of the Bulge got wrong, and the fact that this guy's a major, and then they have this like really funny chat about, "Oh no, you actually got it wrong. Like that actor's with another actress," and then they drive off. That's all you need. It's just great comic relief.
Well, apparently, that's based on a real event when a brigadier general got stopped because he was asked about, I think it was something about the Chicago Cubs, and he answered wrong, and he was held up for quite a while.
Yeah.
So there's a brigadier general getting held up.
Yeah, and obviously baseball.
But they probably thought, well, maybe perhaps a brigadier general's a little bit too much. We'll make it a major.
Yeah, probably. Those German commandos they do end up having a firefight with. They're the first villains that you encounter, but I just think they're done so much better than Battle of the Bulge.
Well, Battle of the Bulge is so on the nose with it, when they introduce them. I don't know, it's just not handled well. And of course, like Scorsese's commandos didn't really play that much of a role in the battle anyway. They weren't actually in Bastogne.
No, they weren't. But I also like the fact the movie cares to say that the Germans dropped some paratroops, because they did. But they famously, it was a bit of a bungled drop, and a lot of their kit they didn't get. So you have men running around with just their pistols and things like that. And they held out for a few days until they gave themselves up, I think. A few of them did. And a few of them walked back to German lines. But it was nice that it mentioned it, because the script writer had done his research, which was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was called Operation Grief.
That was it, Operation Grief.
Which was Scorsese, Otto Scorsese, leading. Well, he was given command of an SS brigade, wasn't he? Which famously was, or infamously, I should say, was involved in the Malmedy massacre. Which is hinted at in this film.
It is,
actually.
Yeah.
The Leighton, the replacement, sort of says, "I've heard that. Is it true that the Germans are killing prisoners?"
Killing prisoners, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a better handling of Malmedy than the film Battle of the Bulge does, because it just hints at it. It doesn't, it doesn't profess to know the full details.
Yeah. I think it's just done more tastefully, isn't it? That's all you need. That's all you need. Someone to go, "Oh God, I've heard this horrific thing that's happening." Someone goes, "Yeah, it probably might be true." That's all you need.
But yeah, like Operation Grief wasn't really super successful sort of infiltration. Like I think maybe like 90 German commandos infiltrated the lines.
Right. Isn't a lot when you think about the whole front.
No, not really. And the plan was to capture bridges south of Bastogne on the Meuse. It wasn't the success that the Battle of the Bulge makes out in the film.
No, you think there were thousands of them.
That's for sure.
Just one last thing that I really enjoyed from a script writing point of view was when the Padre is giving his sermon. Really somber, really sincere dialogue. It has a lot to say about war and the men fighting it. And he says, "Don't let anyone tell you that you were a sucker because you fought fascism." And then they're going to pray, do the Lord's Prayer, but the artillery starts going off. And he goes, "All right, the good Lord has made it so it's too loud for me to give my sermon. So why doesn't everybody pray to their own God in their own way?"
Yeah.
And that's it. And that scene is
just a great little scene.
And it even shows that the Padre is suffering from the cold, because it pans down to his feet and he's just wearing like wraps around his feet. It shows that everyone's suffering, which I just thought was a nice little sentiment, nice scene.
Yeah, that is a good scene. Another one of those nice nuanced scenes I thought is near the end where they're calling on the walking wounded to draw rifles and head to the front.
Yeah.
Because the situation's getting dicey.
Yeah.
And in the hospital, one man says to one of the squad members that's been wounded in the shoulder that he isn't qualified on the M1 Garand. Like the last time he fired a rifle, it was the 1903 Springfield, which is entirely plausible.
Yeah,
like rear echelon troops, you know, the M1 Garand only entered service in 1937 through to 39. That was when it was feeding in. And, you know, when the war began, a lot of troops were still armed with 1903.
Some units went to war with the Springfield, yeah.
That was a nice little thing to include, like this rear echelon soldier. And that reinforces that
all hands to the
idea
pump.
that these troops are being thrust into the line, and it's a dire situation. And that's good narrative storytelling without having to do exposition.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Battle of the Bulge,
again,
Charles Bronson's like, you know, he's like, grab your rifle, you're in the infantry now, kind of like his little snappy lines he has. Whereas, you know, with this, like, it's a serious situation. Like,
it's like, look, we need
someone
you.
walks into the hospital and says, draw a rifle if you can. As they're walking up to the line, he's explaining how an M1 works.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Which is another nice touch.
Yeah, and I think he's even wearing his helmet the wrong way around.
Yeah, maybe he is.
We can't talk about Battleground without talking about the ending. And they're really tired now. You know, they've been fighting for days. And they're at the side of the road and the relief columns coming up. Real Shermans, unlike Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah, that's not a Shaffy. That's a real Sherman.
That's a real Sherman. Oh, I'm not a Shaffy. I'm a real Sherman. Sorry. So there's a Sherman with loads of troops laden on it. And they all shout, "Oh, have you got any spare cigarettes, pal?" You know, and they all chuck them cigarettes, and they give the battered sergeant a cigar, and he's like, "Gee, thanks." You know, it's like the first time he's shown any real emotion for days. Such a lovely little change for him, and he just instantly like starts chewing on it. The officers get in this jeep and drive off. He walks back from this jeep, and they all look at him, and he's standing there in front of them. They think, "Oh God, we're going to be pushed back up to the line."
Yeah.
So he says, "Right, everyone on your feet, you know, guys, come on." Shows you them like dead on their feet, you know.
Yeah, but they're resigned to it, aren't they? They're willing to do
perfectly happy to do it, and obviously they've got no choice. And then the sergeant goes, "About face," and they all like their eyes light up and they start marching off. And they see the FNGs coming down the hill, and he goes, says something like, "Come on, guys, you want to show these guys who's boss." And they start singing their marching song, and that's how the movie ends. And I love it. Brilliant end to the film. They get a reprieve. They finally get to go home or go get some rest. So, Matt, any final thoughts on Battleground?
I think it's just a far superior telling of the story of the Battle of the Bulge than any other film has ever really done. Band of Brothers does a decent job.
Yeah, the two standout episodes for me are the Bulge episodes. I think they're the well done.
But I think they owe a lot to Battleground, I think.
There's a lot of cues from Battleground in there. Well, they're portraying 101st, aren't they? So
exactly. And it's that vibe. It's that vibe that they create with the claustrophobic nature of the fog and the trees and
frantic fighting.
And snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really well done. And
it's a great film.
We thoroughly recommend it here at FOF HQ again. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth a watch over this festive period. I think this is Farting on Film signing off once more. Please leave a review, a like, a subscription on whatever you're listening on, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Ta-ta.
Sound off. 3, 4. Cadence count. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your baby was lonely as lonely could be. Till Jody provided company. Ain't it great to have a pal who works so hard to keep up morale? Sound off. 1, 2. Sound off. 3, 4. Cadence count. 1, 2.